I never planned to tell this story because even now it sounds impossible. But what you're about to hear is exactly what happened the night I walked into a hospital where time didn't move forward at all. I thought it was a normal emergency visit, the kind everyone makes at least once in their life, rushed and scared but trusting the system. I had no idea that once I crossed those sliding glass doors, every rule I understood about time, memory, and healing would quietly reverse itself. And I definitely didn't know I would come out carrying proof that the hospital still exists somewhere outside our timeline. It started with a sharp pain in my chest that hit me out of nowhere while I was driving home after work. I pulled over, breathing hard, trying not to panic, telling myself it was probably stress or something minor. But the pain kept spreading, slow and heavy, like someone pressing a cold hand against my ribs. I searched on my phone for the nearest emergency room and followed the GPS without thinking twice. The hospital looked normal from the outside, maybe a little older than most, with faded brick walls and dim lights that buzzed softly above the entrance. There was no big sign, just plain letters spelling County Medical Center, half of them flickering. I remember thinking it was strange that the parking lot was almost empty for a hospital at night. Still, I was more focused on my chest and the fear creeping into my thoughts. Inside, the air felt colder than it should have, like the building never quite warmed up. The front desk was empty, but a bell sat there, so I rang it once and waited. A nurse appeared from a hallway a moment later, smiling politely, though her eyes looked tired in a deep, unsettling way. She asked my name, date of birth, and symptoms, all very normal, but something about her voice felt slow, like she was choosing words carefully from the wrong direction. She led me to a bed without any paperwork, no bracelet, no questions about insurance. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling tiles, I noticed the clock above the door ticking backward. Not spinning wildly, just moving calmly from 12:14 to 12:13 to 12:12. I told myself it was broken and closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the pain. A doctor came in a few minutes later, flipping through a clipboard that looked worn and yellowed. He asked me how I was feeling now, not earlier, but now, like he expected my condition to be changing in reverse. When I told him the pain had started about 20 minutes ago, his eyebrows lifted slightly. He nodded and said, "Good, then we still have time." That sentence stuck with me, mostly because it didn't make sense. He listened to my chest, checked my pulse, and then said something that chilled me more than the pain ever could. He said, "Your heart attack ended already, so we just need to walk you back through it safely." I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking, but his face stayed serious. Before I could ask what he meant, the pain in my chest started to ease, slowly fading like a memory, losing its sharp edges. My breathing became easier, and my heartbeat steadied. Relief washed over me, but it was mixed with confusion, because I hadn't been given any medication yet. The doctor smiled faintly and said, "See, it's already working." Over the next hour, things kept getting stranger. Nurses would come in and remove bandages that hadn't been applied yet. A woman in the next bed kept thanking staff for saving her life, even as machines were unplugged and rolled away from her. I overheard a conversation in the hallway where someone said a patient had undied successfully, like that was a normal outcome. I finally asked the nurse what was going on, and she hesitated before answering. She leaned close and whispered that this hospital doesn't fix things by pushing time forward. She said they guide people backward to the point before damage became permanent. According to her, it was safer that way, cleaner, with fewer mistakes. I didn't believe her, not fully, but everything I was experiencing lined up with her explanation. Bruises faded instead of forming, pain retreated instead of growing. Patients were discharged healthier than they arrived, but also more confused. And no one ever stayed long enough to notice the pattern unless something went wrong. I noticed the windows next, or rather the lack of any real view outside them. They showed daylight even though it was clearly night when I arrived. When I asked about it, a nurse said the outside world was ahead of us, like it was a different place entirely. That's when I started to feel trapped. I tried to leave, pulling the blanket aside and swinging my legs off the bed. The moment my feet touched the floor, dizziness hit me hard, and the room spun backward, like someone rewinding a video. The nurse rushed over, steadying me, and told me leaving before my entry point would cause damage. She said I hadn't arrived yet, not properly. I demanded to know what that meant, my fear turning into anger. The doctor returned and explained it in the calmest voice I've ever heard. He said the hospital exists slightly out of sync with normal time, and everyone who enters does so at the end of their emergency, not the beginning. They treat by guiding patients backward to safety, then release them exactly when they should have arrived. That explanation should have terrified me more than it did, but instead I felt an odd sense of comfort. My chest no longer hurt, my breathing was steady, and I felt stronger by the minute. Still, something felt wrong deep down, like I was being gently erased from something important. I asked what happens if someone stays too long. The doctor didn't answer right away. He looked down at the floor, then said that some people forget why they came, then forget who they are, and eventually forget how to leave. Those people become staff, or patients forever walking backward through their own lives. He told me that's why the nurse's eyes looked so tired. That's when I noticed something horrifying. On the far wall, there was a framed photo of the hospital staff taken years ago. And in the corner of the photo, younger but unmistakable, was me. I stared at it, my stomach dropping, and asked how long I'd been there. The doctor followed my gaze and sighed. He said time loops here, folding over itself, and sometimes people come back more than once without realizing it. He said I had worked there before, a long time ago, and had chosen to forget. My mind raced, trying to reject the idea, but the familiarity of the place suddenly made sense. I remembered flashes then, not clear memories but feelings. The weight of scrubs on my shoulders, the rhythm of walking the halls, the strange calm of watching pain move backward. I realized I knew where the exits were without being shown. And worst of all, I knew exactly when I was supposed to leave. The clock above the door ticked down to the time I had arrived in the parking lot. My heart started pounding again, this time from fear, not pain. The doctor told me this was my last chance to exit cleanly. If I stayed past this point, I'd start moving backward permanently. I asked him why he let me forget last time. He said I begged him to. He said living forward with questions was harder than starting over without answers. That hit me harder than any diagnosis ever could. As the seconds counted down, alarms began to unring. Lights dimmed upward, and footsteps echoed in reverse. The nurse who first greeted me squeezed my hand and told me not to come back unless I truly had no other choice. I promised her I wouldn't, though part of me already knew how fragile that promise was. The doors slid open, and suddenly I was back in my car, parked outside the hospital, my chest tight with the first warning signs of pain. The building behind me looked abandoned now, dark and silent, no lights at all. My phone showed the exact time I remembered seeing on the clock inside. I sat there shaking, unsure whether to drive away or turn back. Slowly, the pain eased, just like it had before, without explanation. I drove home, carrying memories that felt borrowed and fragile, like they might slip away if I thought about them too hard. In the days that followed, my life returned to normal, mostly. But sometimes I catch myself walking backward a step before correcting it. Sometimes clocks feel wrong, like they hesitate when I look at them too closely. I went back to that street a week later, just to be sure. The hospital wasn't there, just an empty lot with weeds growing through cracked asphalt. No sign, no building, no explanation. But I still have the discharge paper in my drawer, dated for a time that hasn't happened yet. And sometimes late at night, I swear I hear a familiar beep counting down instead of up. If you ever find yourself walking into a place where healing feels too easy, pay attention to the clocks. If this story made you question time, reality, and the choices we don't remember making, you're not alone. For more stories that bend time and challenge everything you think you know, subscribe to Time Traveling Stories and stay with us. Because some journeys don't move forward at all.